Alrighty. So, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking your time to be a part of the HIT Exam Town Hall as a part of the Minnesota Academy of Audiology GRC committee meeting here tonight. My name is Andrew Setram. I am a co-chair of the GRC committee. I'm joined today by my other co-chair, Jackie Waker, as well, in this presentation here for you all tonight. Just a couple housekeeping items here tonight. Um, to start with here, again, we're just going to give a general introduction and background of what the test is about. The meeting again is recorded, so please keep that in mind for any comments as well tonight. We will have an open floor at the very end of the meeting where we'll try to use a raise your hand function or the chat function for answering those questions as we go along. We will save any open mic conversations for the very end. Just as we're going through things, we can go back to those slides at the very end. Um, all of today's information is publicly available through either the MDH website or by request to MDH as well. Okay, and then with that being said, let's get started. So current state of the exam. What is different about the exam since 2022? Pretty much the entire exam has changed in some regard or another. So keeping that in mind, again, if anyone has taken the exam in the past, before 2022, things have changed quite a bit. There is now two different parts to the exam. First part being a virtual portion, second part being an in-person practical portion of the exam. What the virtual day looks like. It's through the Minnesota Department of Health Learning Center, which is an online platform that they use through a Teams meeting to hold this assessment on the virtual day. There's three different parts to the virtual component of the virtual test. First part being the Minnesota laws. So what to know when looking at different hearing aid types of things and those kinds of things. What to know when buying prescription hearing aids. That is something that needs to be given out during hearing aid consults / fittings and those types of things as well. Hearing aid services and fitting, otherwise known as hearing aid troubleshooting. There is 10 multiple choice questions. Again, 30 minutes to answer those 10 questions. All of those are multiple choice. The biggest part of the virtual day is the Council Ear audiogram, which is a simulator done via the Council Ear site, which is 60 minutes to complete this part of the test. The simulated audiogram instructions are given to each candidate once they have registered to the test. Candidates need to make sure that they read and follow those directions very carefully, that they practice those directions as well on Council Ear, and it is the only open book document that can be with the candidate on the day of that virtual test. A link is available to the practice software and the links or the sources for today's presentation as well. Moving on to the in-person practical portion. Quite a few more steps here, but they're usually in a little bit quicker fashion than what is on the online version, just because we're in person. One of them is placing headphones correctly. Is the right ear on the right ear and is the left ear on the left ear? Placing your bone oscillator correctly. Scoring of word recognition scores / speech discrimination, SRT scoring as well, so speech recognition or speech detections testing, measurements of tolerances as well. So your UCL and your MCL, how do you measure those and how would you explain them to a patient? Moving on to the bigger portion of the in-person practical exam is performing otoscopy, as well as with correct bridging or bracing during that portion of the event. Completing a satisfactory ear mold as well. Again, there is more instructions lightly on what that looks like. And then lastly, knowing the 10 FDA symptoms that would be necessary for medical referral before the fitting of a hearing aid. Moving on here next to the modernization outcome data. How are the candidates currently doing since 2022 with the new test? The exam data here shown is from the first time an individual has taken the test only. It was provided by MDH, and in a sense, the 2022 test. The bars that are being shown here across the bottom are the different categories or the portions of the exam, whether it is a virtual or in-person component. It is the amount of individuals that have had to retake that particular component split up by audiologists and hearing instrument specialists. The audiology retest data for those categories. For the simulated audiogram, by far the highest percentage of retakes at 39%, or 37 of the 96 individuals that have audiology status trying to take this exam. Ear mold is at 9%, or in other words, 9 individuals had to retake this portion of the exam in some amount or another. And lastly, there was one hearing aid troubleshooting that needed to retake that component. For each of these components, only the section that needed to be retested is retested. They do not have to retest the entire exam, just the component that they needed to improve on. The exam data of note is definitely the console ear simulated audiogram as well as the ear mold impressions. So let's start with the console ear side of things. Audiologists are needing to repeat this portion of the exam at 39% of the time. Dispensers were at 37% of the time. What has been identified as MDH as an issue has been the masking side of things with the audiogram on console ear. Candidates need to ensure that they read those directions and practice them as provided. Practice beforehand on the console ear program is imperative, especially the protocol of having two full reversals for marking any threshold, including unmasked or masked thresholds. And just as a reminder, any candidate needs to slow down. It is not a race to complete the simulated audiogram. You have an entire hour to complete that test. Moving over to ear mold impressions. About 9% of our audiology candidates have had some trouble with this. Same for hearing instrument specialists. Of note, what has been noticed by MDH has been the lack of otoscopy. By meaning of that is the failure to look before placing an otoblock, after placing an otoblock, and once an ear mold impression has been removed. Other things that have happened has been a blow by of the impression material past the otoblock, and then failure to bridge and brace throughout for otoscopy and the impression taking. Some of this could, again, obviously be built up to nerves, just as, again, it's an important test for all of us to be taking, no matter what your role is in taking the test. Moving on to some questions that have been raised, as well as opportunities for the future here. Current concerns is how the prep information is being provided to the candidates. This being how is the test instructions being distributed, and is it in a clear fashion to each of the candidates trying to take the exam? Other concerns is candidates need to make sure when they do receive that test prep material, they are practicing as the materials are specifying that testing should be completed. Some future considerations as well to be aware of is the audiology, speech language pathology, Interstate Compact. When will Minnesota be allowing privilege across those state lines, and how will this affect our HIT exam licensing? And when do a push for exemption of the HIT exam as a profession? Okay. We will move on to open discussion here. So at this point, I will open the floor for any questions that anyone has based on the data that has been provided today. Does anybody have any questions here along the way of what has been reported from our findings from MDH here today? Go ahead, Carrie.
So the only data we have is from 2022?
So it's aggregate data from 2022 to the most current test. So up into
Okay.
I think it was December was the most recent test, with the
Okay.
newest test occurring here in March.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't clear on that. I appreciate that. And also just for kind of point of reference regarding the exemption, as I shared with you, Andrew, when we were together last Friday, we are on one of only 8 states in the US that requires audiologists graduated with from an accredited university to take the hearing instrument dispenser exam as well. We're one of only 8.
Thank you. Carrie, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Um, do we have any indication as to the breakdown of these applicants? So are they, audiologists from other states moving into Minnesota? Are they more recent graduates? I'm not sure if MDH would have that breakdown of applicant data.
I I was not provided that data when initially asking MDH. I could ask, but they may say no just because that can give away a little bit more personal information on that side of things versus just saying an audiologist versus a hearing instrument specialist. So that would be a very good question to ask here for us for the future.
Uh, Hey, Andrew, Carrie, this is Josie. I believe that information was previously available. I do think it is something they track, or at least they tracked in the past.
Okay. So we will be sure to ask that question then. Any other questions I can help answer? Yes, go ahead.
Just because I don't know, and it's been a while since I've taken the exam. So how do they administer the instructions at present? I know there was a part where you said like how we administer the prep material, the practice material, but how do they do it currently? Is it like an email sent out a week prior or a month prior? Do we know?
It is an email sent out in advance. I don't know the exact time frame that it is sent out before each portion of the exam.
Hmm.
The virtual material is sent out first, which includes the simulated audiogram
Okay.
test protocol that needs to be followed very, very closely. Um, and then from there, after the virtual component, is when the in-person test materials is released to the candidates at that
Okay.
point. Yeah, so
Thank
it's
you.
set out in stages so that way we're focused on one part of the test before getting to the next part. But all of those exam materials should be available on the MDH website.
Okay.
The simulated audiogram instructions, though, are only given out once a candidate has been registered for the test. Other questions?
Andrew, do you know if they've compared the retest data from before the test change to now, just to see how it compares?
I did not see direct data for it, but with the MDH member I was communicating with, they did say that they are having a higher success rate with this current iteration of the HIT exam that has been modernized than prior.
Okay, so prior, more applicants were having to
We're
retake.
requiring some amount of a retake, yes. Any other questions? Again, we'll have sources to all of the material discussed today. Most of it is on the MDH website. It's just a matter of finding the exact link to get to it. There is a couple different links on each of the different pages that gets to different information. So, Carrie, go ahead.
Sorry, I just thought of one other question. For the retake, again, for us older folks, we knew the retake had to be sort of on another in-person exam day. Is there, I presume, since the retake for the council ear seems to be the most common, and that's a virtual option, that there are more frequently offered opportunities for that retake than maybe previously when you had to wait another couple months before the next, round of the HID came out.
Yes, that is correct. There is many more virtual dates allowed for that particular part of the exam, as there is NDH staffers that are administering that portion of the exam that is later scored
Okay.
outside of the multiple choice questions. Those
Oh,
are scored live. It's just the actual simulated audiogram is what is scored at a later date.
so if they did need to retake the ear mold impression portion, they would still have to wait for the next in-person exam date.
Yes, to my knowledge, that is correct. So
Okay.
it'd be that 3 months or so in between them retaking that test, which again can delay licensure for if it is a new audiologist or a new audiologist to the state trying to get licensed in Minnesota.
Thanks.
Okay, so I'm just going to jump over here just so the sources can be seen here as well with the recording. So the HIT exam information is through the MDH website. The what to know when buying prescription hearing aids is also at that point as well. The Minnesota statutes for licensure as well as hearing aid statutes are available on this source page. The Interstate Compact website, MAA's website, the Council Ear Practice, the SLP Audiology Advisory Council, as well as the HID Advisory Council are all available on the end of the presentation here today.
Will we have access to the presentation PowerPoint as well as the recording?
Yes, that is our goal, to have this posted with the recording.
Perfect.
Let's see here. Oh, go ahead, Carrie.
So the other thing that I thought was an important thing to talk about with this is we can't go forward with the recommendation. And remember, it will be a lengthy issue if we want to have audiologists stop taking this licensure exam as part of their audiology licensure. That is, and Melissa, I think you said to me that is a statute, right? So that will require legislative action for this to change. But Andrew made an excellent point when we were discussing this on Friday, which was we really don't have a leg to stand on saying that we audiologists don't need to take this exam if we are failing this exam at a rate that's higher than those of HIDs. So I think one of the primary things that we want to work through with this group, and more importantly, with anyone who's supervising, precepting, teaching these younger audiologists, obviously we don't have any ability to help those who are coming from out of state. But again, if we were hoping to be part of that interstate compact, we have to have that higher level. So this is where I think Josie was concerned, and I fully supported it as well, as to what are the instructions being given? Is this clear? Is the email, like Andrew was saying, when we're talking about council ear, is it clear within that there is a practice exam? Because they're going to flunk, right, the practice exam and not understand that masking. And that's where they'll pay more attention. That's where they'll understand it. So I firmly believe that this is not something audiologists should be required to do. I think we should stand on our licensure with our experience, education, and any certifications we have. But we can't change what exists right now if we're not passing at a higher rate. And so that would be something I'd like to see for discussion. How can we help this? How can we make sure the instructions are really clear? How can we be more successful?
Hey, Carrie, this is
Yeah.
Josie.
Yeah.
I feel like, no, I don't feel like, the instructions for council ear are super clear.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure.
I mean, they literally lay out that you do need to do the 2 reversals. I'd have to look at that again, but I feel like we say that for sure. I know that we define occlusion effect. We define plateau. It'd be slightly different, but to allow for more objective spring, we need
Sorry, Josie. I think you're kind of cutting in
Yeah,
and
you're breaking up, unfortunately. Yeah, and I
The
haven't
middle of
seen the
nowhere.
instructions, but we were just talking about the fact that
Okay.
perhaps where the instructions were located or how they're located are less clear. It just seems odd, given clear instructions and a practice exam, that there's this high fail rate. And so what's missing on that would be just my question. And I could be talking out of my elbow. Maybe I'm not understanding this.
And Carrie, that's not to sorry, not raise my hand. That's kind of what my question was too, with I feel as though, and I came from another state before Minnesota, is there a higher rate of audiologists coming into Minnesota that, understandably have a lot of confidence about we've been doing this for years or decades already and know how to do an audiogram and then are kind of thrown these weird little nuanced things that we have to do with maybe masking that isn't clinically what we really do and or is it vice versa? Is it a higher or lower pass rate with more recent grads coming, getting licensure for the first time? I just think that data would be interesting.
Right. Yeah. That's kind of what we're looking for, a little bit more clarity, right? We understand the data, or I shouldn't say that. We've been presented with the data, but we want to know more about what's going on. Yeah. Thanks. That's a great clarification. And I'll have to admit, yeah, after 30 years of doing audios, you put me on that, I'm going to wing through it because I was chuckling. Andrew said it's not a race. I'm like, oh, yeah, but I can get it done. Right. But that's not going to help me pass the exam.
Okay, so I think there are a couple things here that we can speculate all day long, but that's not going to help anything. Number one, we need to know why. Okay, number one, why are people not passing? We need to find out what portion they're not passing and why that is. Now, MDH has been somewhat reticent to make that information available in the past, which is frankly stinky. It's one thing to talk about how you do the test. It's another thing to simply say this is why people are not passing. The other thing is we moved to this particular model because it was supposed to more closely approximate how you actually do a hearing test. And so part two is it? Did we accomplish that goal with this? And if people are failing at this rate, maybe we didn't. And maybe we need to recognize that perhaps we didn't get closer to that goal as we thought we did, but that goes back to the why question. And then the last thing is, what are we measuring? Because what I'm hearing is we're measuring things that make zero difference to whether you're doing an audiogram properly. Because there are different ways to do hearing testing. And so if they're measuring anything, then you got the correct thresholds, okay, on a bunch of, we could have 100 different random audiograms and we could have some asymmetries and some conductives, and you have to do like 4 of them or something that all have different nuances to them. And if you get the correct audiogram, that should that should be the primary thing. Okay, there are different ways to get there. And I'm struggling, and maybe someone
Hey,
can think
John.
of the situation, but I can't immediately think of a situation where if you come up with the correct answer on a random audiogram where you don't know what it is. It's different if you know what it is, because we know all the dispensers are going to teach their people what the answer is, and probably so would we, to be honest. But if it's
Hey,
random
John.
and you don't, then I can't think of how that would be the wrong way to approach it. Go ahead, Josie.
To answer your question, there are 4 different audiograms.
Hey, that's a problem.
And well, they're really difficult to come up with. They all have a component of air conduction masking where air conduction is 40 dB greater than unmasked bone conduction.
Okay.
And they all have like air, you have to mask bone conduction. So they all have a component of that, and they're all equal. So one audiogram isn't harder than another. So they need to come up with the correct threshold. They need to demonstrate at a minimum 2 reversals. They need to demonstrate the correct starting level of masking and the correct ending level of masking. So I feel like it's pretty objective as far as can they do this, like demonstrating, obtaining a pure tone threshold and masking, right, left, air conduction, bone conduction. So I hope that answers your question about that, like the process of collecting the data.
Well, if that's all there is to it, if it's find the correct threshold, show that you have the correct level of masking, and we're not doing it, then maybe that really is an audiology problem. Then maybe our people really are not trained well enough, because I would consider that very
I don't
reasonable for
know.
what you should be able to do. And if people can't do that, maybe we're looking at the wrong problem.
Yeah, I was a little
Any,
sad.
is there any slides anyone would like me to go back to before I hand it over to Carrie? Carrie, go ahead.
No, thanks. And I think so my one question, and Josie, I don't know if you can talk specifically about it, that I think always used to screw people up, and that I know when I took it was very much advised on like how to do this one particular part of the masking, which I'm wondering if, right, like when you say reversals, in my mind, I'm thinking Houston Westlake, right? And so I assume that's just kind of a term used more so that in HIDs might use that and not Houston Westlake. But I was told every time you are plateauing, you need to then reestablish threshold with every plateau, whether it's, 2 steps of 10, 5 of, 5 of 15. Every time your masking level goes up, you need to then go reestablish your bone threshold, which, right, isn't the way we necessarily do things in audiology. And so I don't know if that part
It
of it
is
required.
I can
it
speak
is
to
a
that,
Houston
and that is
Westlake.
no.
It isn't, that's not a requirement anymore to do
It
the
is not, no, because you've
Okay.
established your threshold, and
Yeah.
so then you just apply your masking, like
Okay.
your appropriate starting masking level, and then you plateau. And
But every time you go up in your plateau, you do not have to go
and
back down in 10.
no,
5. Okay, awesome.
unless their threshold change. I mean, if it shifted, then you would just continue to add masking for an appropriate plateau.
Right.
Yeah, you
Okay.
don't reestablish stress. Question.
Thank you. I know that was always really an odd one that I was told how to
Yes.
do.
So to reiterate on the point of the audiogram portion, it is a Houston Westlake method of testing, not a modified. It is a Houston Westlake protocol for the hearing test. So you do need those 2 full reversals, is what they stated it as for the test.
This was a half hour ago.
The directions say
That's correct,
Houston
John. I was
Westlake.
part of that exam development. That is correct.
Go ahead, Melissa.
Oh, I don't know how much of the instructions we can be privy to, but to your point, when you were saying it is Houston Westlake, so are those words used in the directions?
Yes.
Not just the word reversal. Okay.
Correct. They are. And then the way that the exam is scored, there's a log in Counselier. So the proctor needs to go back to that log and look at what level they presented and where they accepted the response. Do you follow the, up and down to establish those 2 reversals? And that's the part, then you mark it on a worksheet that says they understood how to collect the data. So it's not just getting the correct answer, but that you understood how to collect the data as well.
Any other questions from anyone they'd like to bring forward? Okay. At this time here, we are going to stop the recording. If anyone would like to stay on afterwards for further discussion, they are more than welcome to. But at this point, we would consider the town hall portion that is recorded to be at a close here. So we'll give us a second to pause and end that recording here. If anyone has any additional questions, feel free to speak up here before we pause the recording. I'll give a couple seconds.